So this tutorial is going to walk through the process of moving Revit graphics into InDesign. And we're going to start simply by looking at something that we want to move into InDesign at a specific scale, in this case at a 1/16 inch scale. So the process that I typically use for something like that is a printing process. So I'm going to go the big R print. I'm going to use Qt PDF Writer. If you don't happen to have Adobe Acrobat, which I do have on my computer as a print option, Adobe PDF, Qt PDF is a free PDF writer. It's excellent. Just Google Qt PDF. You'll be able to find it. It works almost every bit as good. In fact, I use it for a lot of things in place of the standard Adobe PDF writer, just because I like it. So what I'm going to do is a print option. I'm going to print the visible portion of the current window. In my setup, I'm going to make sure that I'm centering. I'm using ArcD as my size. That's a 24 by 36 inch print size. And I'm going to verify that zoom is set to 100%. And always double check that when you're working at scale. By default, fit to page is selected as the radio button. You want to make sure your zoom at 100%. So I'm going to click OK, preview this, see how it lays out on a 24 by 36 print, and OK. So as that is getting set up by Qt PDF now in the background, I'm going to go ahead and go to a different view, and let's also look at exporting a different kind of graphic. There we go. Let's actually just call this plan 116 for 1/16. Save. So this is a 3D view from the courtyard area of this plan, or actually just looking towards the courtyard area. So it's in about this location right here. And if you notice, let's just turn that camera on really quick. So this office's exterior view. Let's say show camera. So you can see where that camera is coming from, what it's looking towards. There's actually a tree right here in that view. And so let's go back into this view and let's look at actually making this a little bit closer to a graphic presentation kind of image, especially in the case where I might not have enough time to do a final rendering. So the first thing I'm going to do is this tree needs to go away. It's too much. So I'm just going to select it, hide in view element. I like the idea of having this tree here, but at the same time, I'm not too wild about it occluding everything that is behind it. And I'm interested, again, not in a rendered view, but more of a hidden line view. So I'm going to select that tree, and that's going to be something that I want to turn transparent so that it's a little bit see-through. So without that selected, I'm going to go into the graphic display options. Oh, sorry, not graphic display options. Let me pull this out. The visibility graphics override. I'm going to click the edit, and that is underneath the plant category right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the transparency panel, and I'm going to override that and set that to a transparency level of 50%. And this works great for a lot of different types of graphics. Let's turn that into something that I can now see through. So I can see the door, I can see the relationship between that and what's behind it. The additional things that I want to do is give this a little bit of line weight, a little bit more character with shade and shadow. So I'm going to go ahead and turn shade and shadow on. Underneath the graphic display options, I'm going to cast ambient shadows. That gets me a little bit of additional surface detail. I'm going to drop the shadow contrast down to about 20. So that they're not quite as strong. And you can see also when I hit apply, it also did the ambient shadows. Let's turn that off, we can see the difference. The next thing that I want to do is change my silhouette edges from none to wide. Hit apply on that. Again, you can see it's going to start punching out a little bit of additional line weight detail. And my background I'm going to set to a gradient. So the default gradient is quite nice. It's going to give us a blue sky kind of gradient background, which works well. So I'm happy with that for the most part, except if I look at this graphic in particular, um, it might not give me the resolution that I need for a final board. If I want this to be, let's say, an 8 by 10, I've just sort of accepted the default camera size on this in terms of the cropping. So I'm going to select the exterior crop box and click crop size. And what I want to do to get a higher resolution image out of this is I'm going to change to the scale tab, and let's increase the width to, let's say, 14. So it's going to change the 14. As soon as I click in the height field, it's going to lock those proportions together and actually give me a higher resolution image to export. So I'm going to take this view, I'm going to do the exact same thing, the big R, print, print. Let's go ahead and run a preview of that. And since I'm going to be passing these through Photoshop, I'm actually not concerned at all that that's sort of happening in a 24 by 36 inch field. I'll just crop that quickly in Photoshop and move it to InDesign. So I'm going to go ahead and hit print and OK. And let's go ahead and go into Photoshop. So the first one that I'm going to work through is the floor plan. So I'm going to go open, and that should have been plan 116. And I'm going to work, the default is 300 DPI. It's going to come in at 300. That's great if you have a really high powered machine, a high powered workstation. 150 has worked well enough for me in the past, and my laptop tends to bog down a little bit. So I'm going to work with 150 DPI in the resolution. Again, if you're at a higher end workstation, I would encourage you to work at 300 DPI, but 150 will work just fine. So I'm going to crop out the portion of the plan that I want, and this is ready to push to InDesign now. I'm going to go back here. This is the perspective view, so just rename this perspective dash offices. Let's do the same thing with that. File, open, perspective offices. Let's go ahead and raise that to 300 DPI in this particular case, because it's going to be a fairly small graphic. So essentially it's moving from a vector image in PDF format that we've exported from Revit. It's actually a combination of both raster and vector to a raster only image. So I've got those two pieces now, and I'm going to save them as Photoshop files. Save and OK. InDesign in particular likes working with Photoshop files. It's totally cool with them. So unlike other instances where you might be wanting to save a JPEG, something that's more universal, Photoshop files and InDesign work great together. So I'm going to go ahead and open up InDesign, and I'm going to go File, New, Document. So the default document, when you first open InDesign, depending on your settings or your university where you're at, you might notice an odd increment in terms of width and height. The default unit of measurement in InDesign is pica or a pica. I'm not exactly sure which the correct pronunciation is. I believe it is pica, which is essentially the unit of a 12-point font. So that's about a sixth of an inch. Again, as a designer, I want to think in or see the units that I'm used to thinking in, which is going to be inches. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that on my new document. I'm going to go to my preferences first. Edit, preferences, units and increments, and change picas to inches and inches. So now when I go to File, New, Document, I can build a document that is 36 inches wide by 24 inches tall, and begin working with that as my layout board. So again, you might want to think about using InDesign in instances where you have more complex graphics. You're bringing a wider array of resources together to create a presentation than simply Revit drawing. So in this case, I'm particularly looking at bringing Revit things into InDesign, but you would want to go outside of Revit's page layout tools or sheet tools when you have more graphical things that you're going to want to start working on. So in this case, I'm going to go File, Place, and I'm going to look to bring in both the office perspective. So I'm going to change this to types of documents. The office perspectives. And of course, oh, that's my AU folder. No wonder. Let's go to desktop. Should have checked which folder I was looking in first. So let's bring in the 16th inch plan first, the Plan 116 file. And I'm going to click once, and that's going to place the file. Now, when you first look at these files in InDesign, you'll notice that they actually look really lousy, very pixelated, and that's because what we're seeing is a thumbnail version of that. And that's simply so that I can move it around, work with it quickly, and my view space responds to me very, very quickly rather than working with the full resolution file. If I want to see something closer to what it's going to print as, I can select that object, right-click on it, go to Display Performance, and let's look at it as a high-quality display. So with the high-quality display, you're going to get a better idea of how that's going to print as a final quality. Typically, though, I'm perfectly fine working with that as a typical display, as the thumbnail version. Just be aware that's not representative of how the file is going to print out. So the next file I'm going to bring in, File, Place, and let's grab the office perspectives, place this in as well. So again, I want to make sure that I'm not resizing this. That is a 1/16 inch file. I've got a graphical scale on here. I don't want to mess with that. That is currently at 1/16. I have not changed the scale of the image inside of Photoshop. I have not changed the scale of the image inside of InDesign, so I can be confident that if I took a architectural scale to that, I would be getting the correct dimensions as a 1/16 inch file. With this perspective, though, I can start to actually manipulate some things around. So InDesign's a little bit different than what you might be used to, primarily because there are two selection tools. There is Select and then Direct Select. So if I have an object, like an image selected, my primary selection tool, this one on top, the black arrow, is going to let me modify the frame. So I'm actually moving the frame around the image without modifying the image itself. So let's undo that. The next selection down lets me modify the image within the frame. So there's two different things that we have working, which can be quite nice. And again, it allows me the opportunity as a designer to really play off of the key things that I want to show in a view, and to do it very, very quickly. A lot of times when I'm doing a graphic layout, the proportions of the image are driven more by the layout itself than what the original file is. So an image like that, I might want to come in and modify it quickly to a different kind of scale, like that. I can choose then to fit that image in a couple of different ways. Fill frame proportionally, fit content proportionally, which is keeping the original aspect of the image together, but pushing it inside of the frame, or fit frame to content, or fit content to frame. So there is a series of options that we can use. I'm going to go back to where I just sort of was filling that frame completely. So the next couple of tools that are important. The text tool. I'm going to left click and drag out a text box. The title goes here. So currently this is a very small font size. Let's go to my character, tab right here. So it's Minion Pro at 12 point. I'm more of a fan of Arial, so let's select that. Change the font type to Arial. Arial and Courier both look a lot better. Let's switch that to something larger. Oh, wow, spell checking. Terrible typing. So that's something, again, there's sort of a misnomer that InDesign does not have spell check. And I would like to point out it does. Let's look at how to turn that on really quick. Edit, Preferences, Spelling. I always have dynamic spelling on because I am both a terrible speller and I am also a terrible typist. So I always run with that on so I can immediately see what mistakes I'm making. Still didn't get it right. There we go. Title goes here. So as I move through the formatting of text, let's change that to 60. Drop down, and then we'll do body text goes here. I have a couple of options that I can start working with, and those are underneath the paragraph tab. So if I highlight this, I can begin to look at how the text is going to fill the text box. Zoom out just a bit. So for something like InDesign, I would probably choose not to keep these two that have different point sizes inside of the same text box. Probably take something like that, cut it out, and actually begin to place that in a second text box. And rather than simply looking at body text, let's actually go through and place that with some placeholder text, which is underneath type. Then I'm going to use fill with placeholder text, because this allows me to start looking at text as a graphic on the overall image of the board. So if I zoom out, you can see what I'm starting to build here. So I'm going to zoom in on that portion again. So some of the options that I have, I'm going to select and Control A in that list. Under paragraph, I can force justify, center justify, or I believe that's full force justify right here. Let's hover over that for just a second. And I'm hoping that a description pops up. It's not. I believe this is justify and this is force justify. The next option is hyphenate. This is a really divisive point that gets a lot of people angry. Hyphenate is on by default. More often than not, it annoys people to have the hyphenations turned on. So I would suggest that for most graphics, turn hyphenate off, and then justification works well, in particular if your body text is going to be framed in by something else. So I'm justifying on both the left and the right side. So let's zoom out. Just a few more additional things inside of InDesign. So if you might notice, I'm using the magnifying glass to zoom in, Alt, and the magnifying glass to zoom out. If I am zoomed in on something, a quick double click on the pan tool is going to zoom all. I can also begin to work with some additional elements. Like let's say I have a text box that is going to be, or an image box that's going to be a different shape other than a square. I can start building up something like that with the pen tool. So I'm going to draw in a new shape like that. I can use my text tool, select inside of that, type, fill with placeholder text, and you can see how that's going to start to work. The other thing that you'll notice at times with the text tool is, again, I'm going to just do a fill with placeholder text, is you will see on your text box a little arrow or a little plus sign right here, and that's indicative that if I've written some text and that is larger than what the text box can hold, I need to add in or have the option to add in an additional text frame. So if I click that, I can sort of add the continuation of that text at a new location. And if at some point I select up here in the text and I decide I need to continue typing, you'll see it's going to add text from one frame directly into the next. So it's pushing the text from this frame onto the second frame that I built. So those two pieces are linked together. So there are a lot of additional tools to begin building graphics inside of InDesign. Pay very close attention to this idea of stroke and fill. So if we do a quick graphic with that, I'm going to select the square tool. So that is a default frame right there. There's sort of nothing on the interior. If I select this, which you're used to in Photoshop, this being two colors, if I go ahead and place a swatch here, so I'm going to say I want that to be blue as something that's filled. You can see that I've got a fill that is blue and a stroke, which is the border, as nothing right now. Let's go ahead and, again, I've got that selected. I'm going to go up to this top. Let's add a black border around that. That is 10 points thick. And you can see the type of graphic that's going to build. I'm not sure why you'd want a blue square with a black border in your layout, but you can start building in those types of graphics with this. Pay close attention as you're building graphics and as you're doing things. At times, you will forget that you have this turned on. It's typically really annoying to have a border around an image. It's usually something that you would not want to do, but you need to watch for that. Even a simple one-point border around an image, you might not notice it on screen when you're working because that border is so small, but you'll definitely notice it when it prints out, and it can really sort of wreck a layout. So pay close attention to that. Make sure that if it is on, I would recommend setting that to none. So that's the basics of pushing Revit files into InDesign for a more advanced option of doing a presentation layout.